My goodness, where did it all go wrong? Or perhaps where did it all go right for some people? So I've got some particularly disconcerting news to share with viewers tonight. The Viz magazine, an absolutely legend of the comic and humour world some years ago, didn't actually go bankrupt at all, in actual fact. No, it amalgamated with Searchlight Magazine. In fact, some people would argue that Searchlight Magazine scriptwriters have been totally in tune with the Viz magazine for many years, well before the Viz was even created, in actual fact. Perhaps Jerry Gables was a freelance at the Viz. One would think so. Anyway, and the whole purpose of it was returning to the actual seriousness of the video, if it's possible to be serious about the subject, in actual fact. But I will struggle to do so. Apparently, according to Searchlight Magazine, and it's all over their website, one Nick Griffin, former BNP leader, disastrous failure of the National Front, the man who wrecked the NF and the BNP, is actually a Russian agent, no less. Yes, he's a Putinista, Kremlin agent. I mean, how many times are we going to hear this story about other people? I mean, I've been denounced many times as a Russian agent, you know, quite frankly. And, well, with some grounds, I guess you could say, given the fact that I did actually cooperate with the Russian Federal Security Service regarding those extremist elements in Ukraine who were threatening to upset the apple cart, and indeed they did. In fact, they tipped the entire apple cart over with the globalists, and it's still going on right now. But Nick Griffin, a Putinista, a Russian agent, well, we note that he's not called a Russian spy. That really is a bridge too far, isn't it? Well, who knows, with Jerry Fables and crew. Perhaps even Nick Lowell's and Hope Not Hate are not prepared to go that far across a bridge of that nature, considering the fact that it pretty much collapses at the first stanchion. And why? Well, look, at the end of the day, the basic thesis of this little tale is that Nick is now the secret leader, yes, the secret leader of a covert society, yes, called the Christian Nationalist Party. In fact, it's so secret and so covert, it has its own website and openly announced its existence. Yes, it's really covert, isn't it? You know, we really are entering into the Viz script here. It's just impossible to know which particular department of the Viz we're talking about. Perhaps it's Terry Fuckwit. Yeah, absolutely. Or the other one, which we can't really say because it's rather crude and the algorithm won't like it. But anyway, the amazingly large fairy tales. Absolutely. So, in truth, the Christian Nationalist Party, well, that really began inside the British National Party, didn't it? This is where Griffin betrayed his oath to Odinism. In fact, amongst right-wing Odinists, he's still known as a Nithling, the oath breaker, or an oath breaker, and held in the lowest possible regard because of the fact he betrayed his oath. Remember, Griffin once edited the Rune magazine, no less. The Rune, it's quite a revelation, isn't it, that one? The Rune, it sort of gives the game away quite easily, quite well. So no, Griffin switched over to Christian nationalism because he believed it was a huge vote winner. He'd obviously got his mindset lost in the American drama because Christian nationalism just does not work here in Britain. I repeated this in a previous video about what Al Campbell told Tony Blair. You know, we don't do God in British politics, Tone. Wait until you've left politics to do God. Absolutely right. But these people do God. And the lurid tales of this organisation make it look like it's the Order Mark II. In truth, I would say it's probably based on Christian identity. The radical organisation which brainwashed some of the people in PA. The very same PA, excuse me, which Griffin and Dowson claim is a state-run honey trap operation, which is rather bizarre, isn't it? But all of these people are really bizarre. And the picture that we're building here is that, quite frankly, no nationalist should have anything to do with Nick Griffin and Jim Dowson. Unless, of course, they're into this niche, esoteric Christian fundamentalism. And that's all it is, being no doubt about it. Will it become a mass movement? It has absolutely no chance of becoming a mass movement. Nick Tenconi, another Christian fundamentalist, centre-right crank, has about as much chance of becoming a mass movement leader as Nick Griffin does. And we all know what Nick Griffin does to organisations. Well, the evidence is quite clear. He milks them and then leaves them bankrupt and bereft, and their supporters lost and bewildered to pick up the pieces, which they struggled to do for years at a time when we're running up against the clock where we will become a minority in this country. So will the Christian Nationalist Party have any impact whatsoever? It's not even registered with the Electoral Commission. So therefore we can only assume it has no intention of standing any candidates in any elections, and even if they did, they'd attract a hardcore minority. But I think one of the things that really concerns me about it is not just the usual grifting of Dowson and Griffin, and Searchlight actually do make quite a good point about this in actual fact. You know, they actually said that the lack of transparency is what Griffin and Dowson excel at, which is true. And so therefore, they're highly unlikely to want to register with the Electoral Commission because they might want to see audited accounts. In fact, you're more likely to see audited accounts from Tommy Robinson and Gurmit Singh, you know, than you are Nick Griffin and Jim Dowson. You know, grifters as a feather stick together, although actually they don't. Apparently they're on different sides, and which is bizarre, really bizarre, because they have a very similar mindset in a great many areas. But in truth, the Christian Nationalist Party is what people say it is. It's just another grift operation. Where I take issue with Searchlight, I mean, of course, I have many issues with Searchlight, particularly going back to 1990 and their KKK took my baby away fantasy regarding me. It's just absolutely bloody ludicrous. You see, facts-based evidence is not something they have to worry about at Searchlight, and they have no interest in it anyway. Calling Nick Griffin a Russian agent, a Putinista, working for the Kremlin in a secret operation is absolutely ludicrous. It's astonishingly stupid. But why should anybody be surprised by anything of that nature from Searchlight? They're renowned for it, as I've said, and I can't reiterate that point enough. But Nick Griffin, working for Vladimir Putin in a secret plot, a clandestine scheme of epic proportions. It sounds about as credible as the Prime Minister's allegations regarding these 3 Ukrainian male models, rent boys or whatever they call them basically. I mean, I'm not entirely sure what the situation there is, but I most definitely do not believe the official narrative, the false narrative. And I don't believe this narrative either, because I've never seen any evidence whatsoever of Nick Griffin being involved with the Russian diplomatic corps or Russian intelligence service in actual fact. You know, so that sort of shoots it out of the water quite massively, doesn't it? Sinks it beyond trace, but no, absolutely not. Not in the world of Searchlight Magazine, sorry, the Viz. No, absolutely, it's a live operation, and we should all be worried about it because Griffin is scheming and plotting with these American radicals, you know, part of the grifting operation, to impose this Christian fundamentalism on us. Now, if they had said, you know, he was in a conspiracy with Patriarch Kirill, Rasputin II, the Mad Monk, you know, the man who hates pagans so much, he insisted that Putin put religious officers in all military battalions to ensure paganism didn't take root in said battalions, just like the NKVD political officers of the infamous Commissar Order in World War II, although they won't enjoy the same fate, and unless of course someone in Ukraine decides otherwise, but they might do, you never know. They're quite fond of terminating each other, that lot, you know, as we've seen. You know, the death toll is staggeringly high, but and there's more to come, I assure you. But yes, I mean, Griffin actually working for Putin, for the Kremlin, absolute nonsense. Patriarch Kirill, I could see him most definitely having something in common with Griffin and Dowson and the grift, because in truth the Christian priesthood for centuries has been on the grift, hasn't it? I mean, who can forget the penny tax, buy your way into heaven for a rusty old penny, you know? Many a peasant was milked with that ruse, and I dare say they never made it to heaven and never saw this invisible friend that they claimed to worship. And it's pretty much the same with Griffin and Dowson, and the issue that, oh, you know, they're actually leading this really radical movement in league with the Russians. You know, it's just a hocus pocus fairy tale. of absolutely ridiculous proportions. It truly is. But then, having said that, you can look at the British press on a daily basis, you know, particularly at a weekend, for its fairy tales about Vladimir Putin and the Russian Federation and Ukraine, and they're all entirely in keeping with it, so there's nothing out of the ordinary there at all. But you know, this is a comedy script, truly, it is. Because Griffin is a wrecker, he's not a builder, he's a destroyer, he's not a constructor. This is what Nick does. He milks an organisation like a parasite, sucks it dry, and leaves it totally and utterly wrecked, like a prune, with the stones sucked from the inside out, quite frankly. Yes, scary analogy, sorry for that one. But no, he's definitely not a Russian agent. And we know this for a fact. And the reason why? Well, because Nick hasn't admitted it, has he? Not that he's likely to. Sorry, I am actually being quite sarcastic. But no, the thing is, there isn't a shred of evidence to prove it. And another issue where they say that, this is Searchlight that is, that trying to portray Jada Franson as being some sort of Dumbo who didn't learn her lesson from Paul Goldilocks and, you know, and Britain First, and that she's just been used and manipulated by Dowson and Griffin. Well, I struggle to buy into that one. You know, from my knowledge of dealing with Jada Franson, she's totally clued up, in actual fact, you know. So that casts a new light on it entirely. So Griffin and Dowson manipulating them? No, absolutely not. I think Jada is actually totally sincere about Christian nationalism and wants it to succeed. I'm not sincere about it. You know, to me, it will never succeed. It will never work. It never has worked. It might work in the United States, somewhere in Eastern Europe in actual fact, but not here in Britain. We don't do it. In fact, the Russians have recently bought into this routine, haven't they? You know, Putin, once the head of the KGB, communism, atheism, that is, now claims to be a devout Orthodox Christian, embracing Patriarch Kirill. Yes, that's right. Patriarch Kirill is an invisible friend, like the god they worship. You can't see him. It's just a massive leap of faith. You have to believe in him. And by believing in him, I mean, can you see him here? Look, you know, he's on my left-hand shoulder. Here is Patriarch Kirill. In fact, it could be Nick Griffin. It could be Vladimir Putin. Because when you believe in an invisible friend, it's invisible, isn't it? Quite frankly, you know, no one can see it. Can't you see the consistency? Can't you see the broad shoulder mass and how difficult it is for me to actually squeeze it in tight? And the reason why I can't squeeze it in tight is because it's a bloody fantasy. That's why. And I won't embrace fantasies of any description. And I certainly won't embrace this fantasy from Searchlight Magazine. But I'll tell you what, it's been very entertaining. Yes, absolutely. You know, if you walk into a newsagent, if there are any left these days, you know, if you walk into a newsagent, you should see, you know, old copies of the Viz magazine with Searchlight Magazine at the side of it. You know, it's entertainment, it's fiction, semi-serious fiction in actual fact. And some of what Searchlight produce is actually true and factual, but the thing is they just have to go a bridge too far every single time, and they love invention and fabrication. And they've been sued no end of times. In fact, in 1990, I had to employ a barrister at £300 an hour to get them off my case. They've never published anything about me since. They might do again, in which case I'll be coming for them, most definitely in the legal context, without a doubt. They make up any more fairy tales of that nature against me, and I most definitely will take remedial action against them. The issue is, why isn't Griffin? Because he doesn't really care about being smeared as a Russian agent. You know, I've had it done to me repeatedly. I've never accepted it. I've always fought it. And people say, oh, the harder you fight it, the more you prove it. Well, of course they would do in the reverse psychology world, wouldn't it? Where you can believe anything you want to believe, including the imaginary friend. And I don't have any imaginary friends, sadly. It must be quite heartening in actual fact to have an imaginary friend who's with you the whole time, guides you through all your tiresome stresses and turmoils in life, and will always pick you up when you fall down. However, it is the stuff of the fairy tale, quite frankly. And it's also a fairy tale to believe that Nick Griffin and the Christian Nationalist Party is going to do anything other than grift and flounder. There is only one serious nationalist organisation in this country now, and that's the Homeland Party. And they're pagans and Christians and atheists all work together in tandem towards the same cause, pushing forward the remigration campaign. They're not grifting, we know that for a fact. They're open and accountable, and they are the complete opposite of Griffin and the CMP, and obviously Searchlight Magazine with this wonderful fairy tale. I just wonder how they're going to expand on it next. Let's say the grifting becomes a little more successful than what everyone expects, which it might do, given Dowson's talent for scamming people and raising money. Oh, no doubt about it. You know, he put Tommy Robinson to shame, and Ezra Levant. I do sometimes wonder whether he's actually in league with them secretly. Considering the fact that we're in the world of weird and wonderful fairy tales, why not? So, in truth, if it does become a little too successful, what will they resort to next? Well, of course, that's the wonderful thing, isn't it, about a Hollywood script, is that you can just keep adding to it the whole time. And of course, because when you're talking to brainwashed, deluded groupies, and all organisations have these people, I presume, from what I've seen, they'll believe just about any old shit, quite frankly. But I won't believe just about any old shit. In fact, I won't believe any shit, let alone any old shite, because that's just what this is. But it is entertaining, nonetheless, and you can be absolutely certain, and I reiterate it in no uncertain terms, Nick Griffin and the CMP under no circumstances will ever emulate the high watermark success of the British National Party, and nor is that the purpose of this organisation. I think Jada Fransom would like it to be that way, because I think she's genuine and sincere about it. But for Griffin and Dowson, it's just another grift, pure and simple. And as for the tales that Dowson's actually paying the paramilitaries over in Northern Ireland for protection, well, if that is true, and I don't know if it is, you know, I'm told it is, well, he's got to get the money from somewhere to pay them, hasn't he? And so, you know, the CMP is a damn good grift, you know. So my advice is just enjoy the entertainment. The CMP is a comic book organisation, not because of Jada Franson, but because of Nick Griffin and Jim Dowson, and Searchlight giving it its seal of approval by accusing Griffin of being its covert leader and a Russian agent. My goodness, who knew it? Who knew? Who would have thought it? We need to find the money trail, because we know for a fact Robinson, Farage and Golding have all been on the Russian money trail, don't we? I've proved that conclusively. But Griffin, well, I'll remain open-minded, but at this moment in time I've seen absolutely no evidence whatsoever to suggest Vladimir Putin or even Patriarch Kirill are that desperate enough to hire One-Eyed Jack to do some grifting for them over here. Astonishing. Enjoy the entertainment.